Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Jeremy Bernstein, tape, November 27, side A. Born July 26, 1928, New York City. My father is a doctor. One sister, Barbara, married, 2 children, lives in New Jersey, 6 years younger. Her husband is a lawyer. I was taught to play chess at the age of 12, but did not play seriously until about age of 17, when I joined the Marshall Chess Club in New York on West 10th Street, between 5th and 6th Avenue.
Okay. Whatever came along. Did you have any particular intellectual interests as a child that you remember? I mean, were you an avid reader or?
No. I had few intellectual interests as a child. I was a school misfit and considered, reading a book schoolwork. And I don't think I read a book for pleasure until after I graduated high school.
Well, what were you doing? I mean, in your misfit.
Well, I had one thing I think that perhaps helped me get over being a misfit, a school misfit, and that is that I became interested in photography about the same time, 12 or 13. And I think that if you get involved in any kind of problem solving in depth on almost anything, it is surprisingly similar to problem solving of anything, I started out by just, getting a camera and learning how to take pictures and learning how to print pictures and learning how to build a darkroom and learning how to do all the technical things and so on and so on. And then finally trying to find out how you could sell pictures and become would it be possible to be a professional photographer? And it was a case of over a period of, say, from the age of 13 to 17, you might say, going through step by step by myself without anybody really helping me, the problem solving of becoming a photographer. And I found that, I think in looking back, that this particular thing about problem solving is something that schools generally don't teach you, and that if you can develop a kind of generalized approach to problem solving, that it's surprising how it helps you in anything, and that most of the deficiencies that you see around you in people that say you don't think particularly you're doing their job right or something, is really that, assuming that they care, and a lot of people that appear to care or may actually care are still not going about things particularly the right way. When you think about it, I generally find that it's just that they don't have a good generalized approach to problem solving. They're not thorough. They don't consider all the possibilities. They don't prepare themselves with the right information and so forth. So I think that photography, though it seemed like a hobby, and ultimately led to a professional job in photography, might have been more valuable than doing the proper things in school.
Were you sort of the despair of your family at that time because of your schoolwork, or did you?
Well, it wasn't a real drama, I imagine so, but it was never completely apparent until I graduated from high school that I couldn't go to college, because I graduated in 1945 when all the GIs were now pouring back on the GI Bill, and I had a 67 average, and it turned out that there wasn't any college in the United States, even of the lowest caliber, who would take a student with less than a 75 average in that year. So I couldn't get in. I failed to get into college. I had developed myself as a photographer, and prior to graduating high school, I had sold 2 picture stories to Look. And
what were they about?
One was about a teacher in high school named Mr. Traister, Traister, who taught English. And most of the English courses that I had consisted of the teacher saying, you're to read 5 pages of Silas Marner tonight, And the next day, the class was spent in sitting at the book like Emil Jannings in The Blue Angel, looking up over the book and saying, you know, Mr. Kubrick, and then you stand up and they say, when Silas Marner walked out of the door, what did he see? And if you didn't know what he saw, you got a 0. and that was it. And as a matter of fact, I failed English. The only courses that I got good marks in were science courses.
Yeah.
I think I can't remember now, but I think I got about an 87 in physics. And not in mathematics, though, but in science courses I liked and did reasonably well. But they bought these 2 pictures. Oh, and I also sold them a picture. I sold them 2 picture stories and a photograph of a news dealer sitting on 170th Street in the Grand Concourse, right across 2 blocks away from Taft High School.
Is that where you went? You were
Yeah.
at Taft High School? Yeah.
With all the headlines saying Roosevelt, you know, dies or FDR dead.
Yeah.
And he was sitting there looking depressed. And they liked this picture and used it in a whole series about Roosevelt, and it was sort of the final picture of the series. And I did a documentary film about a boxer named Walter Cartier, who I had previously done a picture story for Look about, and I knew him. And it was called Day of the Fight. And got the whole thing, you know, did everything. Alex helped me, you know, sort of carried lights around and assisted me, and I did the whole thing, just myself and Alex and Walter and his people that he knew, and cut it. And another friend of mine who subsequently has become a professional movie composer named Gerald Fried, F-R-I-E-D, did a film score and got the whole thing finished for $3,900. And then when we began to take it around to the various companies to sell it, they all liked it, but we were offered things like $1,500 and $2,500 and so forth. And
this was, by the way, when you were still age 21, roughly.
well, less than that.
Less than equal.
I did this about, I'd say maybe 9 months before I quit Look, about 20 plus.
Yeah.
And sold it for about $100 less than it cost me to make it. I know it was a small loss, but I had the pleasure of seeing it shown, and you know, I remember I went to the Paramount Theater where it was playing with some Ava Gardner, Robert Mitchum picture, and you know, it was very exciting to see it on the screen, and it got a nationwide and worldwide distribution. And so I thought everybody liked it, and they thought it was good. And I thought that this would be, I'd get millions of offers, on which I got none to do anything. So I made another documentary, this time about a flying priest.
Was Father Hubbard or something?
Father Stadtmuller or something in New Mexico, who flew a Piper Cub around to Indian parishes. I know RKO thought it was a colorful subject. And so I went there and pretty much on my own again made this short, and still, you know, nothing was happening. I had been making a reasonably good salary at Look for 4 years, so I had a certain amount of money, and I was still working. So then I quit Look, because I decided that there obviously wasn't any money in shorts, but that I then found out how much feature films were being made for, and you know, millions, and I had calculated that I could make a feature film for about $10,000. And
well, how did you calculate that?
well, again, by, you know, projecting the amount of film I'd shoot, figuring that I could get actors to work for practically nothing, you know, work with, I mean, at this point I was the whole crew, cameraman, assistant cameraman, you know, director, everything. So I had no cost. So a friend of mine in the village did a script. And so I got the film made, and but it was very, very dull, and it got an art house distribution. It was called Fear and Desire, distributed by Joseph Burston, who was at one time, I think he was the distributor who first brought in Rossellini's pictures. It got a few reasonably good reviews. It got a nice blurb from Mark Van Doren, and who was very kind about it. And it had a few, you know, it had a few good moments in it, but with the exception of one or two of the actors, they were all terrible actors, and I knew nothing about directing any actors.
Well, how did you go about directing them? Just sort of.
Well, I don't remember. You know, it was really, you know, just, it was really just, well, actually, from some of the so-called professional efforts I've subsequently seen, you know, people doing, I would say I didn't go about it that much differently than a lot of people do, but I didn't really know anything, you know. But there were some good moments in it, and as I say, it even got a few good reviews. But, well, first Jimmy and I made The Killing, and...
I mean, you made that by yourselves? Or?
No, well, we formed the company, which was called Harris Kubrick Pictures Corporation. And after looking for a story, we bought a book called The Clean Break by Lionel White. And this was the story that we made into The Killing for United Artists. United Artists had bought Killer's Kiss. Well, first of all, United Artists' function was only to finance and distribute the films. It was up to us to hire the people and make the film. And I presume that United Artists thought that if The Killer's Kiss could be made, you know, on the semi-professional basis it was, that with an adequate amount of money, which was fairly minimum anyway, that, you know, we could make a film. Jimmy had to guarantee completion of the movie, which means that if the movie ran over the budget, he had to put up all the extra money, which is a great safeguard, and especially since financially he was responsible to make this kind of a guarantee, it wasn't that much of a risk on the part of United Artists. Well, we had a very good cast, but none of the people were big stars in the sense that they were extremely choosy about what they were in. And I would say that all of them had probably been in worse films than they might have, even at the beginning, thought this one might turn out to be.
Wasn't Marilyn Monroe?
The principal cast was Sterling Hayden, Colleen Gray, Marie Windsor, Elisha Cook Jr., Joe Sawyer, Ted DeCorsia, Vince Edwards.
I saw that film.
Who, you know, became Dr. Kildare.
So long ago that I'm just trying to remember. Well, how it was the one where Sterling Hayden dies in the end, isn't that right?
No, he gives up. The money blows away at the airport, and he gives up.
I'm very confused.
You probably haven't seen the picture.
No, I remember Sterling Hayden very clearly, but I can't...
You're thinking of the Asphalt Jungle. That's why you thought Marilyn Monroe was in it. He dies at the end of the Asphalt Jungle in a field with a horse.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, you're thinking of the wrong picture. You never saw The Killing.
Maybe that's...
Yeah. If you want to see it, there's a print at the Museum of Modern Art. United Artists could give you the print. So anyway, we made The Killing, and somehow Dory Sherry saw it, and he liked it. And he was the first one who really showed any interest in us, you know, and to the extent of offering us any sort of a deal to make another picture. After leaving MGM, prior to this, Jimmy and I had bought Paths of Glory. I did a screenplay with Jim Thompson and Calder Willingham, and nobody wanted to do it. It was turned down by every company until our agent, Ronnie Lubin, L-U-B-I-N, interested Kirk Douglas in the project, and through Kirk's interest, United Artists put up the money on the basis of it being done for a very low budget in Europe. The picture was a moderate success, but it was nothing to create opportunities for us because of big grosses or profits. The reviews on it were very good. Many reviews were superlative, and from that point of view, it was an enormous success. The greatest virtue of the film was that I met my wife, Christiana, who was an actress. I was watching a television broadcast, looking for an actress, actually watching someone else, and saw her, and got in touch with her agent. She came into the studio, we met, I began dating her, and we subsequently got married a year later. She is a marvelous actress. She had done a lot of work in Germany. I would like her to act, but she has no interest in doing dull, routine acting things, and is more interested in painting. If I ever have a decent part for women, which for some reason I never seem to write into my films, she would certainly do it. This is followed by about 6 months spent working on a script for Kirk Douglas, which he didn't like and was abandoned, and followed by the offer from Marlon Brando to direct his Western, which resulted in 6 months of work, again abandoned as far as I was concerned because I left the project 2 weeks before it started. Followed by Kirk Douglas's offer to take over Spartacus after a week of shooting, which I did, and
you find yourself...
Yes, my narrative criticisms, which were at first so enthusiastically received, began to grow pale as time went on due to the counter pressures of the writer Dalton Trumbo and Kirk's producer Eddie Lewis, Lewis, who did not see eye to eye to me with me on the story.
Where we were.
Between the shooting and the editing of Spartacus, 2 children were born to me, to Kristjana. Children's names: Vivian Vanessa, age 5, Anya Renata, age 6, Catherine Susanna, Catherine spelled K and an E at the end, age 11. Only about 8 weeks was spent in Spain doing the battles and the big march-bys. The whole picture was done on the back lot at Universal.
Did you get any sense of intellectual satisfaction out of Spartacus at all?
No, but it was, again, an opportunity to work, and it was interesting to, from a purely as an exercise, to try to do scenes that you thought weren't very good, and to try to make them interesting. I thought the first 45 minutes of the film, of the life in the gladiatorial school, which was simple, turned out quite well, as far as I'm concerned. But then the rest of the story, from the slave rebellion on to the end, I thought seemed a bit silly.
Let's see, and then what happened at that?
Well, during the making of Spartacus, we bought Lolita, Jimmy and I, and now nobody wanted to make Lolita. Actually, the history of all the films, practically, that I've done is that no one ever wanted to particularly make them, and we just sort of running out the clock managed to put the picture together someplace, Well, nobody particularly wanted to make Lolita. Finally, Seven Arts, a company named Seven Arts, put up the money, and we made it. It was made in England.
Did you yourself do a good deal of rewriting of the book?
Yes, well, Nabokov and I believe, got along very well.
And
I know he liked the film very much when he saw it.
Is there anything that's particularly striking about the making of that film?
The only thing that is regrettable about the film is that due to the incredible pressure against making the film, and put on by the carload by all sorts of groups, although I think the film was faithful psychologically to all the characters and captured, I think, the sense of them, I think that the total lack of eroticism in the story, in this film presentation of it, spoils some of the pleasure of it. You can imply all the eroticism you want, but there's nothing like delivering some to help understand a little more the enslavement, that Humbert was under. I think that I would consider that a criticism of the film. You know, the film could not have been made. You know, nobody would have made it at all, and it would never have been distributed. There was some criticism by some people that said that she looked too old, but I never thought that was a valid criticism because it was one of those books where nobody bothered to really read the description that Humbert gave of Lolita, and they got this that somehow it was a rather interesting example of sort of mass delusion, because it's inevitably people imagined her as being about 9 years old and looking about 9 or 10 years old, and yet there's a very clear description, and there was this peculiar example of a lot of people imagining her as being.
Well, when you got finished with it, did you have a sense that, in some sense, that it was a winner? I mean, was it a thing that you really?
Well, I was very pleased with it. I mean, when you say a winner, I mean, I thought it was I was very pleased with the film. It happened to also be a very successful film commercially.
How did Terry Southern get into the act?
Well, Terry came to interview me for Show magazine shortly before I was leaving for London to make the picture, and I became friendly with him. I had read The Magic Christian in Flesh and Filigree, and I thought he was a terrific writer. And I came to London and started.
You had the script pretty well.
Oh, the script was done, and it was done in its black comedy form. A fact which a certain amount of confusion has been created about in certain areas. The script was done. Peter Sellers was cast, and I was coming over here to prepare the film. And I, thought Terry was very talented. I never stopped working on a script. I like to work with somebody else because under the time pressures that you're under, you can't afford the sort of lapse of intensity that if you work by yourself you might suffer. And Terry seemed like an ideal person because the style of the script was similar, to his sense of humor.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Have any of the pictures been as intellectually complicated as the present one? I mean, the 2001, and posed as many intellectual problems?
Well, I don't know what intellectually complicated isn't really the right description for it, I don't think. I mean, Strangelove was a more intellectually complicated picture, and it involved complex arguments and quite a few abstract ideas, clearly or comically stated. This is not as complex a picture. It's not as complicated a picture in terms of, ideas represented, ideas actually spoken, In praise of Arthur C. Clarke, it is true that he is, I think, the most poetic science fiction writer.
Well, he's also nearly the best informed, I think.
Right. He is scientifically the best informed. His narrative ideas, I think, are, for my tastes, the most appealing. And he has this rather unique poetic sense of the a sort of nostalgia for the the mountains that have eroded away over millions of years, and the millions of years in the future, and people looking back and forward. And you'll have to fix this up because it sounds like real crap, but it's very hard to define it nicely. But it is true that
I find that every time I finish reading some story like that of Arthur's about, I always feel sad when I go.
Right.
There's some element of sadness.
Right.
Either we've made Venus,
right,
contaminated Venus, or he has a vision of something in the future which you'll never see.
Right. Or something in the past that you can never know about.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that's marvelous. I think that somehow without making it sound too pompous or precious, that he captures the hopeless but admirable human desire to know, these things that they never will, can never really know, and to reach for things that they can never, really reach or reach back, and it's very hard to say it exactly, but this sense of sadness and this poetic sense of time passing and the sort of loneliness of, worlds. I mean, he manages. I tell you what, he also manages to do. He can take an inanimate object, like a star or a world or even a galaxy, and somehow make it into a very poignant thing which almost seems alive. He has a way of writing about mountains and planets and worlds with the same poignancy that people write about children or love affairs. And
one doesn't get the impression that that film directors do think a great deal.
You say that. They're supposed to, I mean, it helps.
That they're great, it's their great sort of.
Let's get this quote. I think we ran out.
Quivering reed.
The analogy of using the frustrating, wasted time periods on the set for thinking, with thinking on your opponent's move in chess.
Was telling me a thing about the daily working with or without cutters, which I didn't completely understand. He said that when he directs that he has a cutter who works every day, and that you do not have a cutter who works every day, and that this is somehow a good thing.
With the exception of a few directors, like David Lean, most people have their film edited by film editors as they go along. And then when the film is done, they look at the film and dictate some notes about it, and the film editor tries to do what they say, and then maybe they look at it again and they do it again. But basically, it's like trying to, redesign a city by driving through it in a car, You can notice a few things and say, put that traffic light in the middle of the street, or those buildings over there look kind of shabby or something. But if you really want to do it right, you must do it yourself, piece by piece. So I think by now I have enough sort of ability to imagine the way a scene will come out so that I can tell, without editing the material, if I have enough film coverage and, what I can do with it. And then I edit the film with the editor myself when I'm all finished.
But you haven't done any editing up to now.
None, no. Just the thing, just slinging together that thing you saw. I mean, we've shot about 80,000 feet of film already.
See, what is 80,000 feet in time?
It's about 5,400 feet an hour.
5,400.
It's six times 9, yeah. 5,400 feet an hour. By the way, that isn't a lot of film. People have shot 1 million feet of film, actually.
You mean in their lives?
No, I mean in a film. If, say, a picture is 3 hours long, it would be 16,200 feet. So what ratio is that? That's about 50 to 1 or something, isn't it?
More.
More.
Yeah.
50-something to 1.